Imagine waking up in a world where literally everything wants to kill you. The sun beats down mercilessly, the ground beneath you offers no comfort, and every shadow could hide your death. Now imagine you're about the size of a turkey, defenseless, and your mother abandoned you the moment you hatched. Welcome to life as a baby Allosaurus in the Late Jurassic period, where being born wasn't a blessing. It was a death sentence waiting to happen. You think modern life is tough? Try surviving 150 million years ago when your own species would gladly turn you into lunch without a second thought. The Late Jurassic wasn't some peaceful prehistoric paradise. It was nature's ultimate battle royale. And baby dinosaurs like you were basically walking happy meals for everything with teeth. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Somehow, against all odds, some of these tiny terror birds managed to grow up and become the most feared predators of their time. Today, we're diving deep into the brutal reality of what it meant to be born as an Allosaurus. We'll explore the nightmare that was hatching day, the deadly gauntlet of childhood survival, and the incredible transformation from helpless hatchling to apex predator. Trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at dinosaurs the same way again. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just a story about prehistoric survival. It's a master class in evolution's most brutal life lessons. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how stacked the odds were against our little Allosaurus friend from day one. Picture this scene. You've just broken free from your shell, exhausted from the effort of hatching. Your tiny legs can barely support your weight. Your vision is blurry, and you're completely soaked in egg fluid. The first thing you notice isn't your mother's protective presence. It's the deafening silence where parental care should be. That's because Mama Allosaurus checked out of the parenting game the moment she buried those eggs in the ground months ago. Her job was done the second she covered that nest with dirt and vegetation. This abandonment wasn't cruelty. It was survival strategy. Adult Allosaurus couldn't afford to stick around and babysit. They had their own massive caloric needs to meet, territories to defend, and predators to avoid. Parental care was a luxury that evolution hadn't yet figured out for these apex predators. So there you are, brand new to the world, with zero guidance and a ticking clock already counting down to your likely demise. The statistics were absolutely brutal. Scientists estimate that roughly 90% of Allosaurus hatchlings never made it past their first year. Think about that for a second. 9 out of 10 babies died before they could even figure out how to hunt properly. These weren't gentle deaths either. We're talking about being torn apart by predators, starving to death, getting trampled by massive herbivores, or succumbing to disease and infection. Your first challenge as a newborn Allosaurus wasn't finding food. It was simply not becoming food. The moment you emerged from that shell, you entered a world where everything from other dinosaurs to giant crocodiles, pterosaurs, and even your own siblings viewed you as a potential snack. Your tiny size, which we'd find adorable today, was basically a neon sign advertising fresh meat to every carnivore within miles. The Jurassic landscape itself seemed designed to kill baby dinosaurs. Temperatures swung wildly between scorching days and surprisingly cold nights. There were no comfortable caves to hide in, no soft grass to cushion your falls. and definitely no parental warmth to keep you safe. The terrain was harsh and unforgiving, rocky outcrops, dense forests filled with dangers, and wide-open plains where you'd be completely exposed to aerial predators. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of being born as an Allosaurus was the competition. You weren't just competing with other species for survival, you were competing with your own brothers and sisters. Sibling rivalry took on a whole new meaning when it literally became a matter of life and death. Larger, stronger hatchlings would actively hunt and eat their smaller siblings without hesitation. Family bonds meant absolutely nothing when starvation was the alternative. Your physical limitations as a hatchling were almost comically inadequate for the challenges you faced. Those tiny claws and teeth that would eventually become legendary weapons were basically useless at birth. You could barely pierce the skin of a small lizard, let alone defend yourself against serious threats. Your legs, while relatively long for your body size, lacked the power and coordination needed for effective escape or pursuit. The sensory overload must have been overwhelming. Every sound could signal danger. The crash of a massive diplodocus footstep, the rustle of a hunting ceratosaurus moving through vegetation, or the piercing cry of a pterosaur scanning for easy prey. Your developing senses were constantly on high alert, flooding your tiny brain with information that could mean the difference between living another day or becoming someone else's dinner. Food was another nightmare entirely. Adult Allosaurus could take down massive prey through strength and strategy, but baby Allosaurus had to settle for whatever scraps they could find or catch. We're talking about insects, small lizards, maybe the occasional fish, if you were lucky enough to be near water and skilled enough to catch one. Every meal was a victory against starvation, but also a risk. Hunting meant exposure, and exposure meant vulnerability. The psychological pressure must have been intense, even for a reptilian brain. Constant vigilance was the price of survival. There was no such thing as relaxation or play. Every moment was spent either searching for food, hiding from predators, or trying to find shelter. Sleep became a calculated risk, necessary for survival, but potentially fatal if you chose the wrong spot or stayed unconscious too long. Weather presented yet another layer of challenges. The late Jurassic climate was generally warm, but it wasn't stable. Seasonal changes brought their own problems. Dry seasons meant water sources became scarce and concentrated, creating dangerous bottlenecks where predators would wait for desperate prey. Wet seasons brought flooding, disease, and different hunting patterns among the various species sharing your environment. Your growth rate as a young Allosaurus was remarkable, but it came at a cost. The rapid development required massive amounts of protein and energy. You needed to consume roughly your own body weight in food every few days just to maintain your growth trajectory. Miss too many meals, and your development would slow, making you even more vulnerable to the countless threats surrounding you. The learning curve was impossibly steep. Unlike mammals, which benefit from extended parental teaching, you had to figure out everything through trial and error. How to hunt effectively, which plants to avoid, how to read the behavioral cues of other dinosaurs, where to find water, how to construct adequate shelter. All of this critical survival knowledge had to be acquired through personal experience or observation of other survivors. Social dynamics among juvenile Allosaurus were complex and dangerous. While they occasionally formed loose groups for protection, these alliances were temporary and could dissolve into violence at any moment. Trust was a luxury that few could afford. Cooperation existed only when it served individual survival interests, and betrayal was always just a hungry moment away. The diseases and parasites of the Jurassic period posed threats that modern animals rarely face. Without any form of medical care or even basic hygiene, infections could easily become fatal. Parasites could weaken you just enough to make the difference between successfully escaping a predator or becoming its next meal. Even minor injuries had the potential to become life-threatening complications. Perhaps most challenging of all was the constant need to adapt your behavior as you grew. Strategies that worked when you were turkey-sized became useless as you grew larger and stronger. Hiding spots that once provided safety became traps. Prey that once seemed impossible became potential targets, while former threats became less concerning. This constant recalibration of survival strategies required intelligence and flexibility that pushed young Allosaurus to their cognitive limits. Your developing mind faced an impossible balancing act between aggression and caution. Too aggressive, and you'd bite off more than you could chew, literally ending up as prey to something bigger and nastier. Too cautious, and you'd starve while better opportunities slipped away to bolder competitors. Finding that sweet spot between calculated risk and reckless abandon was the difference between thriving and dying, and most young Allosaurus never quite figured it out. The territorial nature of adult Allosaurus created invisible boundaries that you had to navigate without any map or guidance. Wander into the wrong area, and you might find yourself face to face with a 30-foot killing machine that viewed you as either competition or a convenient snack. These territorial disputes weren't limited to adults either. Juvenile Allosaurus established their own smaller territories, and trespassing could result in vicious fights that left the loser permanently disabled or dead. Water sources became deadly gathering points where the entire food chain converged. Rivers and lakes attracted massive herbivores seeking hydration, which in turn drew every predator within miles. As a young Allosaurus, you needed water just like everything else, but approaching these areas required the strategic thinking of a military operation. You had to time your approach perfectly, choose your route carefully, and always have multiple escape plans ready. The sheer variety of ways you could die was staggering: drowning in flash floods, being crushed by falling trees during storms, getting lost in dense forests and starving, falling into ravines, being stung by venomous creatures, succumbing to infections from minor cuts. The Jurassic world seemed to have an endless creativity when it came to eliminating young dinosaurs. Every single day presented dozens of potential death scenarios that required constant vigilance to avoid. Your camouflage was your most valuable asset during these early months. That mottled brown and green coloration wasn't just for show. It was the difference between life and death. Learning how to use shadows effectively, understanding which vegetation provided the best concealment, and mastering the art of remaining perfectly still while predators passed nearby became essential skills. But camouflage only worked if you understood how to use it properly, and that knowledge came through dangerous trial and error. The hunting techniques you developed as a juvenile were nothing like the powerful ambush tactics you'd eventually master as an adult. Instead, you became a specialist in what scientists call persistent scavenging, following larger predators at a safe distance and hoping they'd leave enough scraps behind to sustain you. This strategy required incredible patience and the ability to read the behavioral patterns of much larger, much more dangerous carnivores. Your first successful kills were small victories that felt monumental in the context of your struggle. Taking down a lizard the size of your head represented hours of careful stalking, split-second timing, and the successful application of hunting techniques you've been practicing for weeks. These tiny triumphs built your confidence and refined your predatory instincts, but they also attracted unwanted attention from other hungry juveniles who might try to steal your hard-earned meal. The social hierarchy among young Allosaurus was brutally simple. Size and aggression determined everything. Larger individuals took the best hunting spots, the safest sleeping areas, and first access to any discovered food sources. Smaller juveniles had to make do with whatever remained, creating a feedback loop where the strong got stronger and the weak got weaker, until natural selection eliminated them entirely. Sleep patterns had to be completely reimagined for survival. Adult mammals and birds often sleep for extended periods, but as a juvenile Allosaurus, you couldn't afford such luxury. Instead, you developed a pattern of brief power naps, never sleeping deeply enough to be completely vulnerable, always maintaining some level of awareness of your surroundings. This chronic sleep deprivation affected your development and decision-making abilities, adding yet another layer of difficulty to an already impossible situation. The seasonal migrations of herbivore herds created boom and bust cycles in food availability. When massive herds of Camptosaurus or Stegosaurus passed through your area, the abundance of potential prey and carrion could sustain you for weeks. But when they moved on, you faced extended periods of near starvation that tested every survival skill you'd developed. These feast or famine cycles shaped your behavior and metabolism in ways that would influence your entire life. Your developing sense of smell became your early warning system and your hunting guide. Learning to distinguish between the scent signatures of different species, understanding how weather conditions affected scent trails, and developing the ability to track prey over long distances were skills that took months to master. A juvenile Allosaurus with a poorly developed sense of smell was essentially operating blind in a world where information meant survival. The transition from scavenging to active hunting marked a crucial developmental milestone. Your first attempt at taking down live prey larger than an insect required you to overcome every instinct screaming at you to hide and run away. The adrenaline rush of a successful hunt was intoxicating, but it also marked your transformation from prey to predator, a psychological shift that fundamentally changed how you interacted with your environment. Competition with other young predators intensified as you grew larger and more capable. Juvenile Ceratosaurus, other young Allosaurus, and even some of the larger carnivorous mammals competed for the same resources you needed. These encounters often erupted into vicious territorial disputes where retreat meant starvation and fighting meant risking serious injury or death. Learning when to stand your ground and when to cut your losses became a critical survival skill. The development of your adult features happened gradually, but dramatically changed your capabilities. As your teeth grew longer and more serrated, as your claws became true weapons, and as your muscles developed the power to deliver devastating bites, you began to occupy a different niche in the ecosystem. But this transition period was particularly dangerous because you were no longer small enough to hide effectively, but not yet large enough to defend yourself against serious threats. Your growing intelligence became apparent in your ability to learn from mistakes and adapt your strategies. Unlike your earliest days when survival was purely instinctual, you began to demonstrate problem-solving abilities, memory of successful techniques, and even rudimentary planning for future hunts. This cognitive development was crucial because the challenges you faced required increasingly sophisticated responses. The psychological toll of constant survival pressure created behavioral patterns that would persist throughout your life. Hypervigilance became your default state. Aggressive responses to perceived threats became automatic, and the ability to form social bonds beyond temporary alliances remained limited. These survival-focused behaviors served you well during your vulnerable period, but would influence every aspect of your adult behavior. Your first major growth spurt brought new challenges along with increased capabilities. Rapid physical development required massive amounts of food, making hunting even more critical to survival. But it also meant that hiding spots that once provided safety became too small. Familiar territories had to be expanded or abandoned, and your interactions with other dinosaurs shifted as you became large enough to be perceived as a genuine threat rather than just potential prey. The gradual mastery of persistence hunting techniques marked your evolution from opportunistic scavenger to capable predator. Learning to pursue prey over long distances, understanding how to use terrain to your advantage, and developing the endurance needed for extended chases represented a fundamental shift in your survival strategy. These skills would eventually make you one of the most feared predators in your ecosystem, but mastering them required surviving countless failed attempts and near-death experiences. Your territorial instincts began manifesting in ways that would have seemed impossible during your helpless hatchling days. The same juvenile who once cowered behind fallen logs now found himself actively marking boundaries and defending prime hunting spots against other young predators. This wasn't just posturing. It was essential real estate management in a world where the best territories meant the difference between regular meals and slow starvation. The psychology of dominance started reshaping your brain in fundamental ways. Each successful confrontation with another juvenile built neural pathways that reinforced aggressive responses to competition. your developing mind began categorizing every encounter into simple terms: dominate or be dominated, eat or be eaten, claim territory or lose access to resources. This binary thinking served you well in immediate survival situations, but created behavioral patterns that would define your entire adult life. Water became your greatest tactical advantage and your most dangerous vulnerability. Rivers and streams attracted massive herbivore herds seeking hydration, creating concentrated hunting opportunities that could feed you for weeks. But these same water sources drew every predator within miles, turning peaceful drinking spots into gladiatorial arenas where only the strongest survived. Learning to time your approaches, identify safe crossing points, and escape routes became advanced coursework in staying alive. Your hunting success rate improved dramatically, but so did the risks you were willing to take. Confidence bred from successful kills began pushing you toward increasingly dangerous prey. Where once you targeted lizards and small mammals, you now set your sights on juvenile herbivores that could fight back with deadly consequences. Your first encounter with a young Dryosaurus that refused to flee taught you painful lessons about the difference between confidence and recklessness. The seasonal rhythms of the Jurassic began shaping your behavior in sophisticated ways. You learned to anticipate migration patterns, predict weather changes that would drive prey into predictable locations, and time your own movements to exploit these natural cycles. This environmental awareness separated successful juveniles from those who remained reactive to immediate circumstances rather than planning for future opportunities. Your developing pack mentality created complex social dynamics among your age group. Temporary alliances formed during particularly difficult hunts or when facing larger predators, but these partnerships dissolved the moment resources became scarce. Trust remained a luxury you couldn't afford, yet cooperation occasionally provided benefits that solitary hunting couldn't match. Navigating these shifting relationships required social intelligence that many juveniles never developed. The transformation of your physical capabilities happened so gradually that you barely noticed until suddenly you realized you'd become formidable. Your bite force increased exponentially with each passing month. Your claws developed the strength to inflict serious damage, and your overall size began commanding respect from creatures that once ignored you completely. But physical growth brought new challenges. Larger size meant higher caloric requirements and fewer places to hide when things went wrong. Your first successful takedown of prey, larger than yourself, marked a psychological turning point that rippled through every aspect of your behavior. The rush of bringing down a struggling Camptosaurus juvenile after hours of patient stalking triggered neurochemical changes that made hunting intensely addictive. The combination of strategic planning, physical exertion, and the ultimate reward of fresh meat created feedback loops that drove you to seek increasingly challenging prey. Competition intensified as your capabilities expanded into territories previously dominated by larger predators. Adult Ceratosaurus and older Allosaurus began viewing you as legitimate competition rather than an insignificant annoyance. These confrontations escalated beyond simple territorial disputes into life-or-death battles where your growing skills were tested against opponents with years more experience and significantly more raw power. Your learning curve accelerated as pattern recognition became your most valuable cognitive tool. Understanding which herbivores were most vulnerable at specific times of day, recognizing the behavioral cues that indicated successful ambush opportunities, and developing mental maps of territorial boundaries all contributed to your evolution from reactive survivor to proactive predator. This intellectual development was just as crucial as your physical growth. The development of your adult hunting strategies required abandoning many techniques that had served you well as a smaller juvenile. Ambush tactics that relied on concealment became less effective as your size made hiding difficult, forcing you to develop new approaches based on speed, endurance, and direct confrontation. This transition period was particularly dangerous because you had to unlearn successful behaviors while simultaneously mastering unfamiliar techniques. Your relationship with pain evolved from simple avoidance to tactical acceptance. Minor injuries became acceptable costs of successful hunts, and your tolerance for discomfort increased dramatically as the rewards for aggressive behavior outweighed the risks of staying safe. This psychological shift separated successful predators from those who remained cautious scavengers. But it also led many juveniles to make fatal miscalculations about their own limitations. The emergence of your adult personality traits became apparent in how you responded to setbacks and failures. Some juveniles developed cautious, methodical approaches to hunting after experiencing near-death encounters, while others became increasingly reckless and aggressive. Your specific combination of experiences shaped neural pathways that would influence every decision for the rest of your life, creating the unique behavioral signature that would define your adult hunting style. Your growing reputation among other dinosaurs began affecting how they responded to your presence. Herbivores that once ignored you completely now showed alarm behaviors when you appeared, while smaller predators began giving you wider berths during territorial encounters. This shift in how others perceived you created new opportunities, but also attracted attention from larger predators who viewed your success as a potential threat to their own dominance. The mastery of complex hunting techniques required integrating multiple skills simultaneously. Successful persistence hunting demanded physical endurance, tactical planning, environmental awareness, and the psychological fortitude to maintain pursuit even when immediate success seemed unlikely. Few juveniles developed all these capabilities, which explained why mortality rates remained high even among those who survived their earliest months. Your first encounter with a potential mate triggered behavioral changes that surprised even your developing instincts. The complex courtship rituals of your species required balancing displays of strength with careful negotiation, as potential partners were just as capable of inflicting serious damage as any prey animal. These social interactions added entirely new dimensions to survival calculations and forced you to develop communication skills beyond simple territorial aggression. The establishment of your first legitimate territory marked your transition from juvenile wanderer to settled predator. Defending a specific area required constant vigilance strategic placement of scent markers, and the willingness to engage in serious combat with any challenger. But successful territorial control provided access to predictable resources and the psychological security that came from having a defensible home base. Your hunting success began attracting scavengers who learned to follow you at safe distances, hoping to capitalize on your kills. Managing these parasitic relationships required developing new strategies for protecting your hard-earned meals while avoiding unnecessary conflicts that could result in injury. The presence of scavengers also served as an early warning system for larger predators, who might be drawn to the commotion of feeding frenzies. The development of your adult metabolism created new challenges around food acquisition and energy management. Your growing body required massive amounts of protein to maintain muscle development and support your increasingly active lifestyle. But successful hunts remained unpredictable despite your improving skills. Learning to gorge effectively when food was available and endure extended periods without eating became crucial survival adaptations. Your psychological relationship with violence underwent fundamental changes as hunting became your primary survival strategy. What once triggered fear responses now generated excitement and anticipation, while the sight and smell of blood became associated with success rather than danger. These neurological adaptations were necessary for your survival, but also created behavioral patterns that made peaceful coexistence with other predators virtually impossible. The integration of all your developing skills began producing hunting successes that would have been unimaginable during your vulnerable hatchling phase. Taking down prey several times your size through strategic planning and relentless execution demonstrated the remarkable transformation from helpless infant to capable predator. But each success also raised the stakes for future encounters, as failure became increasingly costly with your growing reputation and territorial commitments. Your emerging adult identity reflected the countless life-or-death decisions that had shaped your development from the moment you hatched. Every successful hunt, every territorial dispute, every narrow escape from larger predators had contributed neural pathways and behavioral patterns that now defined your approach to survival. The terrified hatchling who once hid behind vegetation had evolved into a formidable predator whose presence could clear entire areas of potential competitors. The sophisticated predatory behaviors you developed represented millions of years of evolutionary refinement, compressed into months of intensive learning under the ultimate selective pressure: survive or die. Your success in navigating this brutal education system proved that you possessed the rare combination of physical capabilities, intellectual adaptability, and psychological resilience necessary to thrive in one of Earth's most competitive ecosystems. Your transformation from vulnerable prey to apex predator demonstrated the incredible plasticity of juvenile development when subjected to extreme environmental pressures. The same genetic programming that initially made you helpless and dependent had eventually produced the complex behaviors, physical capabilities, and mental frameworks necessary to dominate your ecological niche. This remarkable developmental journey showcased evolution's ability to create killing machines perfectly adapted to their specific environmental challenges. The approaching transition to full adulthood promised even greater challenges and opportunities as your growing size and capabilities opened access to prey species that remained beyond your current abilities. But the foundation for future success had been established through months of brutal trial and error learning that eliminated weak strategies while reinforcing effective ones. Your survival to this point proved you possessed the essential qualities necessary for long-term success in the Jurassic ecosystem. Your developing understanding of ecosystem dynamics revealed the complex web of relationships that determined survival outcomes for every species in your environment. Recognizing how herbivore behavior patterns, predator territorial boundaries, seasonal resource availability, and environmental factors all interacted to create hunting opportunities required sophisticated cognitive abilities that separated successful predators from those who remained reactive to immediate circumstances. The psychological toll of constant competition and violence had fundamentally rewired your neural architecture in ways that prioritized survival over every other consideration. Social bonds remained superficial and temporary. Emotional responses became calibrated to threat assessment rather than complex feelings. And decision-making processes focused exclusively on maximizing survival odds, regardless of other consequences. These adaptations served you well in your current environment, but would influence every aspect of your future behavior. The relentless march toward full maturity brought with it a cruel irony that would have broken the spirit of your former hatchling self. The bigger you grew, the hungrier you became. Your metabolism had transformed into a furnace that demanded constant feeding, yet the very size that made you formidable also made hunting exponentially more complex. Gone were the days when a single lizard could sustain you for hours. Now you needed kills that could feed a small army, and every creature worth hunting possessed the tools to fight back with lethal force. Your teenage years as an Allosaurus were perhaps the most dangerous period of your entire existence. You'd outgrown the ability to hide from threats, but you hadn't yet developed the overwhelming power that would eventually make you untouchable. This awkward middle phase created a perfect storm of vulnerability, where overconfidence met inexperience in combinations that killed more juveniles than any other factor. You were big enough to attract serious attention from apex predators, but still small enough to lose badly in direct confrontations. The psychological pressure of this transitional period pushed your developing mind to its absolute limits. Every decision carried amplified consequences because mistakes that might have been survivable as a small juvenile could now prove fatal. The margin for error had shrunk to practically nothing, yet the complexity of survival challenges had increased exponentially. Your brain worked overtime processing threat assessments, opportunity calculations, and strategic planning that would have overwhelmed your primitive neural networks just months earlier. Your first serious territorial dispute with another subadult Allosaurus became a defining moment that crystallized everything you'd learned about dominance and submission. The encounter began as a simple disagreement over access to a fresh Camptosaurus carcass, but escalated into a brutal demonstration of what competition really meant among your kind. Both of you had invested too much energy in the hunt to back down, and both understood that retreat would mean accepting subordinate status in future encounters. The fight itself was unlike anything you'd experienced during your smaller skirmishes with other juveniles. This wasn't playful sparring or brief displays of aggression. This was warfare conducted with weapons designed to kill. Your opponent matched your size and determination, possessing identical tools for inflicting damage and similar levels of desperation to maintain access to resources. The battle stretched on for what felt like hours, with both combatants inflicting serious wounds while testing each other's commitment to victory. Your victory came not through superior strength or speed, but through the accumulated wisdom of countless smaller conflicts that had taught you how to read your opponent's intentions and exploit momentary weaknesses. The deciding moment arrived when your rival made a crucial miscalculation, overextending during an aggressive lunge and exposing his neck to your devastating bite. The taste of another Allosaurus's blood triggered primitive satisfaction circuits that had been dormant since your earliest sibling rivalries. The aftermath of this territorial triumph provided insights into the complex social dynamics that governed interactions among your species. Word of your victory spread through scent markers and behavioral cues that other predators instinctively understood, establishing your reputation as a legitimate territorial holder rather than a wandering juvenile. This elevated status brought both benefits and burdens. Better access to prime hunting grounds balanced against increased challenges from other ambitious subadults seeking to establish their own reputations. Your hunting strategies underwent radical evolution as your capabilities expanded beyond simple persistence tactics. The development of true ambush skills required mastering the art of patient stillness, learning to suppress your natural movement impulses for hours while waiting for perfect strike opportunities. This psychological discipline separated successful adult hunters from those who remained perpetually hungry due to premature attacks that spooked potential prey. The complexity of stalking large herbivores demanded integrating multiple skill sets simultaneously. Reading wind patterns to avoid detection, understanding herd dynamics to identify vulnerable individuals, timing approaches to coincide with natural distractions, and maintaining perfect body control during final approach. Sequences all had to function flawlessly for hunts to succeed. A single mistake in any component could waste days of preparation and leave you facing starvation. Your relationship with pain evolved into something approaching friendship during this period of intensive learning. Minor injuries became badges of honor that demonstrated your willingness to engage in serious combat for resources, while major wounds taught valuable lessons about the consequences of tactical errors. Your tolerance for discomfort increased dramatically as successful hunts required pushing through fatigue, hunger, and physical damage that would have incapacitated your younger self. The development of your adult bite force created new possibilities for prey selection that had been unimaginable during your juvenile phase. Creatures that once seemed impossibly well defended suddenly became potential targets as your jaws developed the crushing power to penetrate thick hide and shatter bones. This expansion of dietary options reduced competition pressure, but also attracted attention from larger predators who viewed your success as a threat to their own feeding opportunities. Your growing intelligence manifested in increasingly sophisticated problem-solving abilities that set you apart from less adaptable competitors. Learning to use terrain features as hunting aids, developing mental maps of territorial boundaries, and even rudimentary tool use through environmental manipulation demonstrated cognitive capabilities that few other predators possessed. These intellectual advantages often proved more valuable than raw physical power in determining hunting success. The psychological transformation from reactive survivor to proactive predator required fundamental rewiring of your neural response patterns. Fear, which had once been your primary emotional state, became just one tool among many for assessing situations and planning responses. Confidence, aggression, and territorial pride emerged as dominant personality traits that shaped every interaction with other dinosaurs and influenced your approach to environmental challenges. Your first successful takedown of an adult Stegosaurus represented the culmination of months of careful preparation and strategic planning. The massive herbivore's defensive capabilities required approaches that your juvenile mind couldn't have conceived, involving complex maneuvering to avoid the deadly tail spikes while positioning yourself for killing bites to vulnerable areas. The victory provided enough meat to sustain you for weeks while establishing your credentials as a truly formidable predator. The social dynamics of your species became increasingly important as your territorial claims expanded and overlapped with those of other adult Allosaurus. These interactions required delicate negotiations between aggression and diplomacy, as unnecessary conflicts could result in injuries that compromised hunting effectiveness. Learning to read the intentions and capabilities of other adults became essential for maintaining territorial integrity without engaging in suicidal battles. Your mating instincts began influencing behavior in ways that complicated survival calculations with entirely new variables. The drive to reproduce created motivations that sometimes conflicted with optimal hunting strategies, leading to risky behaviors that your purely survival-focused juvenile mind would have rejected immediately. Balancing reproductive opportunities against survival priorities became another layer of complexity in an already challenging existence. The establishment of your adult hunting patterns required abandoning many techniques that had served you well during your growth phase. Persistence hunting gave way to explosive ambush attacks that maximized the element of surprise while minimizing energy expenditure. This strategic evolution reflected both your physical development and your accumulated knowledge of prey behavior patterns. Your relationship with other predator species shifted dramatically as your size and capabilities expanded into their traditional niches. Competition with Ceratosaurus and other large carnivores intensified as your hunting success reduced available prey for everyone. These interspecies conflicts often escalated beyond simple territorial disputes into life or death struggles for ecological dominance. The development of your adult territorial instincts created complex mathematical problems around resource allocation and defensive strategies. maintaining control over large enough areas to support your caloric needs while defending multiple boundaries against various threats required constant strategic thinking and energy management. Poor territorial decisions could lead to starvation or fatal conflicts with superior opponents. Your hunting success began attracting followers, smaller predators and scavengers who learned to capitalize on your kills by waiting for you to finish feeding before moving in to clean up remains. Managing these parasitic relationships required developing new behavioral strategies that balance the benefits of having early warning systems against the costs of sharing your hard-earned meals. The psychological toll of constant violence and competition began manifesting in behavioral patterns that would persist throughout your adult life. Hyper-aggressive responses to perceived threats became automatic. Social interactions remained limited to brief territorial negotiations, and the capacity for complex emotions beyond anger and satisfaction remained underdeveloped. These adaptations served immediate survival needs, but created personality traits that made peaceful coexistence virtually impossible. Your growing reputation as a successful predator created ripple effects throughout your local ecosystem as other species modified their behavior patterns to account for your presence. Herbivore herds altered their grazing routes. Smaller predators avoided your territory entirely, and even other adult Allosaurus began treating you with the cautious respect reserved for legitimate threats. This environmental impact demonstrated your transformation from insignificant juvenile to ecosystem-shaping force. The mastery of complex hunting techniques required years of practice and refinement that separated truly exceptional predators from merely competent ones. Learning to coordinate multiple attack strategies simultaneously, adapting tactics to specific prey species, and developing backup plans for when primary approaches failed all contributed to hunting success rates that could sustain adult metabolic demands. Your adult cognitive abilities had evolved far beyond the simple pattern recognition that characterized your juvenile thinking. Strategic planning now extended weeks into the future, involving complex calculations about seasonal prey movements, territorial expansion opportunities, and resource allocation decisions. This intellectual development paralleled your physical growth in creating capabilities that would have seemed impossible during your helpless hatchling phase. The integration of all your developed skills began producing hunting performances that bordered on artistic in their precision and effectiveness. Every movement served multiple purposes. Every decision reflected accumulated wisdom from thousands of survival encounters, and every successful kill demonstrated the remarkable transformation that had occurred since your vulnerable birth. You had become exactly what evolution intended, a perfectly adapted killing machine designed to thrive in one of Earth's most competitive environments. Your emerging adult identity reflected not just individual development, but millions of years of evolutionary refinement compressed into your personal survival journey. The behavioral patterns, physical capabilities, and mental frameworks that now defined your existence represented the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of successful Allosaurus, who had faced similar challenges and emerged victorious. Your survival proved that you carried the genetic and psychological heritage necessary to continue this ancient lineage. The approaching peak of your physical development promised even greater capabilities and opportunities as your size and strength continued expanding toward their ultimate potential. But the foundation for future dominance had been established through the brutal educational process that had eliminated every weakness while reinforcing every successful adaptation. Your transformation from helpless hatchling to formidable predator demonstrated evolution's remarkable ability to create apex predators perfectly suited to their environmental challenges. Your understanding of ecosystem dynamics had evolved into sophisticated awareness of how every species, environmental factor, and seasonal change influenced survival opportunities within your territory. This systems thinking separated truly successful predators from those who remained reactive to immediate circumstances rather than proactive in exploiting predictable patterns. Your ability to anticipate and plan for future conditions gave you decisive advantages over competitors who lacked this cognitive sophistication. The psychological architecture that now governed your behavior had been forged through countless life-or-death encounters that eliminated ineffective response patterns while reinforcing successful ones. Every neural pathway reflected hard-won survival lessons. Every instinctive reaction incorporated accumulated wisdom from dangerous situations. And every decision-making process prioritized outcomes that maximized your chances of continued dominance in an unforgiving environment. Your relationship with violence had evolved into something approaching artistry, where the application of lethal force became a precisely calibrated tool for achieving specific objectives rather than simply an emotional response to threats. This sophisticated understanding of when, how, and why to engage in combat reflected the kind of strategic thinking that separated apex predators from those who remained slaves to primitive aggressive impulses. The complexity of your adult hunting repertoire encompassed dozens of specialized techniques tailored to specific prey species, environmental conditions, and tactical situations. This behavioral flexibility allowed you to exploit opportunities that more rigid predators would miss, while avoiding situations where your particular capabilities would be insufficient for success. Your adaptability had become perhaps your most valuable survival asset. Your territorial control now extended over areas that could support multiple smaller predators, demonstrating the efficiency with which you converted environmental resources into survival advantages. The sophisticated patrol patterns, scent marking strategies, and defensive preparations that maintained your territorial integrity required constant attention and energy investment, but provided the security necessary for long-term success in a competitive environment. The social intelligence you developed for managing interactions with other adult Allosaurus reflected understanding of complex dominance hierarchies, territorial boundaries, and reproductive opportunities that governed relationships among your species. These diplomatic skills often proved more valuable than raw combat ability in avoiding unnecessary conflicts while maintaining access to essential resources. Your hunting success had reached levels that created surplus food availability during good periods, allowing you to build energy reserves that could sustain you through inevitable lean times when prey became scarce or environmental conditions made hunting difficult. This feast and famine management strategy reflected sophisticated understanding of resource cycling and energy economics that separated successful adults from those who struggled with inconsistent food supplies. The reputation you'd established among all species in your ecosystem influenced every interaction and created opportunities that were unavailable to less successful predators. Your presence alone could scatter potential competitors. Your territorial markers commanded respect from other predators, and your hunting patterns had become integrated into the behavioral calculations of every creature sharing your environment. Your adult capabilities now encompass the full range of predatory skills that had been developing since your vulnerable hatchling days, integrated into a coherent behavioral system that could adapt to virtually any survival challenge your environment might present. The transformation from helpless infant to apex predator represented one of nature's most remarkable developmental achievements, a testament to evolution's ability to create killing machines perfectly adapted to dominate their ecological niches. The psychological confidence that now characterized your approach to every situation reflected the accumulated victories and successful adaptations that had brought you to adult maturity. Fear had been replaced by calculated caution. Desperation had given way to strategic patience, and the constant threat of death had transformed into confident expectation of continued dominance over every competitor and challenge your environment could produce. Your story had become a perfect example of how the most seemingly impossible survival challenges could be overcome through the combination of genetic programming, environmental pressure, and individual determination. From the moment you broke free from your shell as a helpless hatchling, every day had presented life or death tests that eliminated the weak while strengthening the survivors. Your success in navigating this brutal selection process had created exactly the kind of apex predator that would dominate the late Jurassic landscape. The skills, instincts, and behavioral patterns that now defined your existence would continue evolving as you faced the challenges and opportunities of peak adulthood. But the foundation had been established through the most intensive survival education imaginable, a curriculum where failure meant death and success meant becoming one of Earth's most formidable predators. Your graduation from this deadly academy marked the beginning of your reign as a true apex predator in one of history's most competitive ecosystems. Your transformation into a true apex predator brought with it a cruel irony that would have shattered your hatchling psyche. The bigger and more successful you became, the more enemies you accumulated. Every kill you claimed, every territory you dominated, every rival you defeated added another layer to a growing reputation that attracted challengers from across the Jurassic landscape. Success bred contempt among your own kind, and your dominance became a beacon calling every ambitious predator within miles to test their mettle against yours. The mathematics of survival had shifted dramatically from your early days of hiding and scavenging, where once your greatest concern was finding enough insects and small lizards to sustain your turkey-sized frame. you now required massive quantities of fresh meat just to maintain your enormous bulk. A fully grown Allosaurus needed to consume roughly 400 pounds of meat per week, equivalent to taking down a substantial herbivore every few days or constantly scavenging for multiple smaller kills. This caloric demand created a relentless pressure that drove every decision and shaped every behavior. Your hunting patterns had evolved into something resembling military campaigns rather than simple predatory encounters. Each major hunt required days of reconnaissance, careful study of prey behavior patterns, and strategic positioning to maximize success probability while minimizing energy expenditure. The casual opportunism of your juvenile years had been replaced by methodical planning that reflected the high stakes of adult survival. Failure wasn't just disappointing. It could mean weeks of hunger that weakened you enough to invite challenges from rivals sensing vulnerability. The psychological burden of constant territorial defense created stress levels that would have killed smaller, less resilient creatures. Your domain now stretched across dozens of square miles, encompassing prime hunting grounds, reliable water sources, and strategic defensive positions that required constant patrol and maintenance. Scent marking alone consumed hours of each day, as the chemical signatures that proclaimed your ownership needed regular refreshment to remain effective deterrents against trespassers. Your interactions with other adult Allosaurus had devolved into elaborate chess matches, where every encounter carried the potential for explosive violence. The complex social calculations required for these meetings demanded sophisticated understanding of body language, territorial boundaries, and dominance hierarchies that governed relationships among apex predators. A misread signal or inappropriate response could trigger battles that lasted hours and left permanent scars on both participants. The seasonal rhythms of the Late Jurassic created predictable cycles of abundance and scarcity that tested your resource management skills to their absolute limits. During migration periods, when vast herds of herbivores moved through your territory, you could gorge yourself on kills that provided enough meat to last for weeks. But the lean periods between migrations forced you into increasingly desperate hunting strategies that pushed the boundaries of what even your formidable capabilities could accomplish safely. Your relationship with pain had evolved beyond simple tolerance into something approaching partnership. The constant minor injuries from hunts and territorial disputes became background noise that you learned to work through rather than allow to slow you down. Serious wounds required careful management of hunting activities and territorial patrols to avoid showing weakness that rivals might exploit. But they rarely stopped you from pursuing necessary survival activities entirely. The development of your adult bite force had reached truly devastating levels that could crush the skulls of most prey species with a single, well-placed attack. This overwhelming power created new tactical possibilities, but also demanded precise control to avoid wasting energy on excessive damage that provided no additional nutritional benefit. Learning to calibrate your attacks for maximum efficiency while conserving strength for potential follow-up encounters became a crucial skill that separated successful hunters from those who exhausted themselves unnecessarily. Your mental mapping of territorial boundaries, prey movement patterns, and seasonal resource availability had become incredibly sophisticated, allowing you to predict hunting opportunities weeks in advance and position yourself for maximum success. This strategic thinking extended beyond immediate survival needs to encompass long-term planning that reflected genuine intelligence rather than simple instinctual responses to environmental stimuli. The emergence of your adult personality traits had crystallized around themes of dominance, territorial pride, and aggressive self-reliance that made cooperation with other predators virtually impossible, except under the most extreme circumstances. Your psychological development had been shaped by thousands of encounters where compromise meant weakness and weakness meant death, creating behavioral patterns that prioritized individual success over any form of social bonding or collaborative advantage. Your hunting repertoire now encompassed virtually every predatory technique known to your species, from explosive ambush attacks that relied on surprise and overwhelming force to extended persistence hunts that wore down prey through relentless pressure over vast distances. This tactical flexibility allowed you to exploit opportunities that more specialized predators would miss, while avoiding situations where your particular strengths would be insufficient for success. The establishment of your breeding territory marked a new phase in your development that introduced reproductive considerations into survival calculations that had previously focused exclusively on individual needs. The drive to mate created motivations that sometimes conflicted with optimal hunting strategies, leading to risky behaviors and territorial expansions that your purely survival-focused juvenile mind would have rejected as unnecessarily dangerous. Your first successful mating encounter required navigating complex courtship rituals that balanced displays of strength and fitness, with careful negotiation to avoid triggering defensive responses from potential partners who possessed identical weapons and comparable fighting abilities. The psychological intensity of these interactions created entirely new categories of stress and reward that influenced your behavior in ways that extended far beyond the brief mating season. The responsibility of territorial inheritance that came with successful reproduction added another layer of complexity to resource management decisions that already stretched your cognitive abilities to their limits. Understanding which areas provided the best combination of hunting opportunities, defensive advantages, and access to potential mates required sophisticated analysis of multiple variables that changed seasonally and in response to the activities of other predators. Your growing reputation as a successful breeder attracted challenges from other adult males seeking to claim your territory and genetic legacy for themselves. These encounters escalated beyond simple territorial disputes into existential battles, where defeat meant not just loss of resources, but elimination from the gene pool entirely. The psychological pressure of defending your reproductive success created stress levels that affected every aspect of your behavior and decision-making processes. The management of your expanding territory required constant vigilance and energy investment that left little time for rest or recovery from the demanding physical requirements of adult survival. Patrol routes had to be maintained daily. Scent markers required regular refreshment, and potential threats needed immediate investigation to prevent small problems from escalating into major territorial challenges that could undermine your entire established dominant structure. Your hunting success had reached levels that created surplus food availability during favorable periods, but this abundance attracted scavengers and opportunistic predators who learned to exploit your kills by waiting for you to finish feeding before moving in to claim whatever remained. Managing these parasitic relationships required developing strategies that balanced the benefits of having additional early warning systems against the costs of sharing your hard-earned resources. The psychological toll of maintaining apex predator status began manifesting in behavioral patterns that reflected the constant stress of defending your position against ambitious challengers who viewed your success as proof that your territory and resources could support their own dominance aspirations. Every interaction with other large predators carried the potential for conflict, creating a state of perpetual readiness for combat that exhausted mental and physical reserves. Your adult cognitive abilities had developed sophisticated threat assessment capabilities that could evaluate multiple potential dangers simultaneously while calculating optimal responses that maximize survival probability across various scenarios. This mental processing power allowed you to navigate increasingly complex survival challenges that would have overwhelmed your simpler juvenile decision-making systems entirely. The integration of all your developed skills had created hunting performances that approached perfection in their efficiency and effectiveness. Every movement served multiple tactical purposes. Every decision reflected accumulated wisdom from thousands of survival encounters. And every successful kill demonstrated the remarkable transformation that had occurred since your vulnerable hatching day decades earlier. Your relationship with violence had evolved into something resembling artistic expression, where the application of lethal force became a precisely calibrated tool for achieving specific objectives rather than simply an emotional response to perceived threats. This sophisticated understanding of combat dynamics reflected the kind of strategic thinking that separated true apex predators from those who remained slaves to primitive, aggressive impulses. The complexity of your territorial maintenance routines encompassed dozens of specialized behaviors that required constant attention and energy investment, but provided the security necessary for long-term survival in an environment where competitors constantly probed for signs of weakness or inattention. Your ability to maintain control over such vast areas demonstrated the efficiency with which you had learned to convert environmental resources into survival advantages. Your social intelligence for managing interactions with other adult Allosaurus had developed into understanding of complex dominance hierarchies, territorial boundaries, and reproductive opportunities that governed relationships among your species. These diplomatic skills often proved more valuable than raw combat ability in avoiding unnecessary conflicts while maintaining access to essential resources and mating opportunities. The reputation you had established throughout your ecosystem influenced every interaction with other species and created opportunities that were unavailable to less successful predators. Your mere presence could scatter potential competitors. Your territorial markers commanded respect from other predators, and your hunting patterns had become integrated into the behavioral calculations of every creature sharing your environment. Your adult capabilities now encompassed the full range of predatory skills that had been developing since your vulnerable hatchling days, integrated into a coherent behavioral system that could adapt to virtually any survival challenge your environment might present. The transformation from helpless infant to apex predator represented one of nature's most remarkable developmental achievements and a testament to evolution's ability to create perfectly adapted killing machines. The psychological confidence that now characterized your approach to every situation reflected the accumulated victories and successful adaptations that had brought you through the gauntlet of juvenile survival to adult dominance. Fear had been replaced by calculated caution. Desperation had given way to strategic patience, and the constant threat of death had transformed into confident expectation of continued supremacy over every competitor your environment could produce. Your story had become the perfect example of how seemingly impossible survival challenges could be overcome through the combination of superior genetics, environmental pressure, and individual determination that separated successful predators from the countless failures who never survived their first year. Every day since breaking free from your shell had presented life-or-death tests that eliminated the weak, while strengthening the survivors into exactly the kind of apex predator that would dominate the late Jurassic landscape. The skills, instincts, and behavioral patterns that now defined your existence represented the culmination of the most intensive survival education imaginable, a curriculum where failure meant death and graduation meant becoming one of Earth's most formidable predators. Your success in completing this deadly academy had earned you the right to reign supreme in one of history's most competitive ecosystems. But it had also created the psychological architecture that would define every aspect of your remaining years. But even as you reached the pinnacle of predatory perfection, the cruel mathematics of biological existence were already beginning their inexorable countdown toward your eventual decline. The same metabolic processes that had fueled your remarkable growth and development now demanded constant feeding to maintain your massive frame, while the accumulated damage from decades of violent encounters began creating subtle weaknesses that would eventually undermine your dominance. The first signs of aging appeared so gradually that you initially dismissed them as temporary setbacks from particularly challenging hunts or unusually harsh seasonal conditions. Your recovery time from injuries began extending slightly longer than expected. Your explosive burst speed showed occasional inconsistencies, and your endurance during extended chases seemed marginally reduced compared to your peak performance levels from previous years. Your territorial patrols required incrementally more effort to complete thoroughly, though your experience and tactical knowledge compensated for minor physical limitations through more efficient route planning and strategic positioning that maximized effectiveness while conserving energy. The sophisticated understanding of your domain that had developed over years of successful defense allowed you to maintain control through intelligence and reputation rather than relying purely on physical intimidation. The psychological adjustment to declining capabilities created new categories of stress that your dominance-focused mindset struggled to process effectively. Accepting limitations went against every survival instinct that had been reinforced through decades of successful competition. Yet ignoring physical realities could lead to fatal miscalculations during hunts or territorial disputes that your younger self would have handled easily. Your hunting strategies began shifting toward prey selection that favored tactics where your experience and knowledge provided advantages over competitors who possessed superior physical capabilities, but lacked your sophisticated understanding of behavioral patterns and environmental exploitation. This tactical evolution reflected genuine wisdom accumulated through countless successful encounters, rather than simple adaptation to temporary setbacks. The management of your reputation became increasingly important as subtle signs of aging attracted attention from ambitious younger predators who sensed potential opportunities to challenge your established dominance. Maintaining the psychological intimidation that had protected your territory for years required careful management of public appearances and strategic demonstration of continuing capabilities when challenges could not be avoided entirely. Your legacy had already been established through successful reproduction and territorial dominance that influenced ecosystem dynamics across vast areas of late Jurassic landscape. The behavioral patterns, hunting techniques, and survival strategies that defined your approach to predatory existence would continue influencing environmental relationships long after your individual reign ended, creating ripple effects that shaped evolutionary pressures for countless other species. The approach of your eventual decline added poignant significance to every successful hunt, every territorial victory, and every moment of dominance that remained available to you. The knowledge that your time as apex predator was finite made each achievement more meaningful while simultaneously highlighting the temporary nature of even the most impressive biological success stories. Your transformation from helpless hatchling to dominant adult had demonstrated evolution's remarkable ability to create perfectly adapted predators through the combination of genetic programming and environmental pressure that eliminated every weakness while reinforcing successful adaptations. The journey from vulnerable infant to apex predator represented not just individual achievement, but the culmination of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, compressed into a single lifetime of extraordinary survival against impossible odds. The gradual recognition of your mortality created a profound shift in priorities, that would have been incomprehensible to your younger, invincible self. Where once every decision revolved around expansion and conquest, now you found yourself calculating the cost-benefit ratio of each territorial dispute with the cold mathematics of a predator who understood that energy was no longer infinite. Your body had become a depreciating asset that required increasingly careful management to maintain the illusion of unstoppable dominance. Your hunting patterns underwent subtle but significant modifications as you learned to work smarter rather than harder. The explosive ambush tactics that had defined your peak years gave way to more methodical approaches that relied on patience and positioning rather than raw physical power. You began selecting prey based on vulnerability rather than size, targeting isolated individuals and injured animals that required less energy expenditure while providing comparable nutritional returns. The psychological burden of concealing weakness from potential challengers required constant vigilance and strategic misdirection that exhausted mental resources you had once taken for granted. Every public appearance became a carefully choreographed performance designed to project continued strength while minimizing actual physical demands that might reveal your diminishing capabilities to observant rivals waiting for signs of vulnerability. Your territorial boundaries began contracting as you made pragmatic decisions to abandon outlying areas that required too much energy to defend effectively. This strategic withdrawal was disguised as tactical repositioning, allowing you to maintain face while consolidating control over core regions that provided the best combination of hunting opportunities and defensive advantages with minimal patrol requirements. The emergence of younger predators who showed no fear of your legendary reputation created increasingly dangerous situations that tested your ability to maintain dominance through intimidation rather than actual combat. These encounters required masterful psychological manipulation to avoid physical confrontations that might expose your reduced capabilities while still demonstrating enough authority to prevent future challenges. Your hunting success rate remained impressive through accumulated knowledge and tactical sophistication that compensated for declining physical attributes. Decades of experience had taught you to read environmental cues and prey behavior with almost supernatural accuracy, allowing you to position yourself for kills that appeared effortless but actually reflected profound understanding of timing and positioning. The management of your energy reserves became a complex calculation that governed every aspect of daily survival. You learned to ration your strength like a precious resource, saving explosive power for moments when failure would mean starvation or territorial loss, while accepting reduced efficiency in routine activities that could be accomplished through technique rather than brute force. Your relationship with pain evolved once again as chronic aches and stiffness became constant companions that influenced every movement and decision. The accumulated damage from thousands of hunts and territorial battles created a catalog of limitations that required careful accommodation without appearing weak to potential challengers who monitored your behavior for signs of decline. The solitary nature of your existence became both blessing and curse as aging progressed. Without pack support or social structures to provide assistance during difficult periods, you faced every challenge alone, while simultaneously avoiding the competitive pressures that group dynamics would have created. Your independence remained complete, but increasingly precarious, as your capabilities diminished. Your territorial reputation continued providing advantages that your current physical condition couldn't have earned through direct confrontation. The psychological impact of decades of successful dominance created a buffer zone of fear and respect that deterred many potential challenges, while you still possessed enough capability to handle those who couldn't be intimidated into submission. The seasonal cycles that had once provided predictable hunting opportunities now presented increasing challenges, as your reduced mobility made it harder to capitalize on migration patterns and environmental changes. You found yourself adapting to remain competitive in an ecosystem that continued operating at the relentless pace that had shaped your entire existence. So there you have it, the absolutely brutal reality of being born as an Allosaurus in the Late Jurassic period. From that first terrifying moment when you cracked out of your shell as a helpless turkey-sized hatchling to your eventual rise as a 30-foot apex predator, every single day was a master class in survival against impossible odds. We've witnessed the staggering 90% mortality rate, the cannibalistic sibling rivalries, the relentless hunt for food, and the psychological transformation from prey to predator. This wasn't just a story about dinosaurs. It was a testament to evolution's most brutal education system, where only the most adaptable, intelligent, and ruthlessly determined individuals could graduate to adulthood. The next time you think your life is tough, remember the baby Allosaurus, who had